In an age of BlackBerries and email and text messages, we're increasingly losing the ability to communicate face-to-face. It's a dying art that my guest today says she's trying to resurrect. Eileen McDargh is here. She's author of Talk Ain't Cheap, It's Priceless. And later in the show, Gary Siegel is going to tell you how to avoid email road rage and other foot-in-the-mouth issues. He's author of the upcoming book, Mouthtrap. Great to have you here today, Eileen.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Well, a common phrase you hear is, you guys better stop talking and start working. But you say the phrase you like is, you guys better start talking and start working. Is that it?
That's right. Start talking and get to work. That's exactly it.
So what does that mean exactly?
Well, what I encountered in the business setting is that far too often now people do not talk to each other. If I ask somebody what goes on, they say nobody talks to me. Somebody once told me that their manager only sent them email messages. Rarely came in and talked. And you know what? That's the thing that creates
I'm a huge email
human
fiend, by the way.
You know what? I mean,
admit.
I'm not saying don't. I'm saying it's both end. And what we've done is we've forgotten that the way you and I create a relationship is when we talk to each other.
Nothing like the face-to-face.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, you couldn't have a show if we weren't doing this.
Right. Yeah, no, I wouldn't.
Said to you on my BlackBerry, I don't think so.
People often say to me, in fact, a publicist the other day said, oh, can we do a call-in? Or sometimes people say, can we do the satellite thing? But I always say, I like to have them here in the studio in person, so we can sit down and talk.
And the reason you like to have them here in the studio in person is because the words just won't resonate. You see, I was dead, wasn't I?
Right.
But if you see my face, you know that there is something behind there, and you and I can begin to create a relationship. And in business, if you want people to stay with you as customers, as colleagues, as employees, you better create that relationship.
Well, you are a consultant for all kinds of big companies and go out there and work with these people. What do you see out there in the field, and how do you help them? What do you do for them?
Well, first off, what I like to do is I like to get people together in a room and say, who sits around this table? I've had people who have worked with people for a couple of years and don't actually know that human being that's sitting there. They get mad at each other and they don't understand why they get mad, and that's because they did something on email that, and by the way, email stands for escalation and error. Oftentimes.
Easy to take things out of context.
Absolutely.
Or,
so you get them together, and when I begin to understand who you are as a person, what you bring to the table, what I bring to the table, and we have conversations that actually go deeper, you and I create a better working relationship.
Yep. And I think you're less likely to, let's say, well, not only misunderstand, but maybe get upset if you actually met the person or know them, if you put a face to a name, as they say, instead of just an anonymous person out there.
I think that's true. And now in our global economy, and we have so many virtual teams, I don't care how virtual your team is, at some point in time, and early on rather than later, you need to bring that team together somehow face to face, whether it's in video conferencing, and something that's facilitated where it's more than just a data dump, but it's a person-to-person interaction.
And I know you're big on what, like weekend retreats and that sort of thing as well?
I love to take groups away on weekend retreats, get them out of the office. Now, there's always has to be a deliverable. You got to end up and walking away with something at the end of that time you can do something.
Not just a party out in the woods.
No, not just the party, and it's not to play games. It's not to play games. But I've really seen some big walls come down in organizations where somebody says, oh, that's why you do that? I never understood why you do that. Because they never ask each other the questions.
So you think these things do work, because some people think, oh, that's very touchy-feely or something, you know what I mean, like have the retreat out.
Oh yeah, you know what, I don't even call it a retreat. I call it an advance. You go away so that you can advance what you do together as an organization, as a department, as a team. So it's not game playing, it's none of that stuff. It's really how do we begin to create these connections that are at the most human levels. Because we always speak on two levels. There's the content, rah, 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 and there's the intent. There's an emotion behind it, and business is always an emotional thing.
Well, you talk a lot about the way that people can, well, what is the intent underneath? You want to tell us more about that? I mean, what versus the direct?
Well, let me give you an example of the intent underneath. If I say to you, you can't have your vacation on June 4th, you are going to hear the word can't.
Can't.
And
I don't like that word.
You know, none of us see, that's another thing. We learn how to use our language. So underneath that word, you can't have your vacation. The emotion underneath there was, you know what, we've got this huge order that's due. I really need you here. I didn't explain anything. And so I gave you content, but there was an emotion, you know, I'm really worried. You who heard it said, the guy doesn't like me. Guy doesn't want me to go have fun with, you know, you did all kinds of interpretation.
I'm just ticked off now because I can't have that vacation.
That's right, you can't have that vacation. Whereas if I came to you and we spoke on, you know, this is why this is important to me. John, this is why, you know, this is why I really need you. By the way, I know your name is not John. This is why I need you here. Let's see how we can work this so that we can both have a win-win here. It's a very different kind of conversation.
And you say it does make a difference, by the way. I mean, you're big on, you say, tell people what you can do, not what you can't do.
Correct.
Which I love that. I mean, that's the right attitude, I think, in general in life in a lot of situations.
Well, you know, that's why we wrote this book. And it's a little book because, frankly, I don't want people to spend a lot of time reading. I want people to spend time talking.
Talking. Well, if people aren't talking these days, I think they're also not listening.
Oh.
Can you tell us how people, what is naive listening?
Naive listening. Naive listening is when you hear something and instead of automatically saying, well, I've heard that before, been there, done that, bought the t-shirt, why did you say this? You say, tell me more. And it means that you accept what is given and you respond to it as if you've heard it for the first time. See, one of the most valuable things that you do for your guests is you listen to them, even if you've heard it 100 times. And you know what? When people feel listened to, they are more likely to give you their heart, their head, and their hands. And that's what you want.
Yeah, I don't know how you could do this kind of a show without listening because it just, I guess some people try maybe, I don't know.
Well, you've seen that. I mean, you've seen that oftentimes in talk shows, but it happens in business, it happens in home, where we have not learned to step back. Listening is a learned skill. We don't come by it easily.
And it's a good point you mentioned that it's not just in business, it is at home as well. In fact, I had a woman on pod, Kim, I'll mention, actually in the studio not that long ago, we did a show, and she had was it a plant? She held something when they were talking, but I'm thinking of you and the talking stick.
Oh, the talking stick. The talking stick, yeah.
You want to tell us about that?
Sure. Actually, that is not an original idea of mine. That actually comes from Native Americans. And it was a way for people to be heard in council. And sum and substance is the elder held basically a talking stick. And when he had his say, whoever wanted to speak was the next person to speak. Now, there was a protocol around it. And the protocol is no one can interrupt you. There's no reprisals for what you say. Nobody goes back and says, oh, that was a really dumb, stupid thing that you said, Gregory. And that you had to speak with total honesty and integrity. And if you didn't, that ruined your reputation forever within that council. So one of the things I've had groups do is sometimes when they get together, we have a physical thing that when you hold that physical thing, whether it's the book, like the book, whatever it is, that's your turn to speak. And then when you've said your piece, we sit, we listen, the next person has that.
So you just kind of sit there and shut up and listen for a while while they're talking.
Well, isn't that interesting? Yeah. How many times are we not listened to?
And then, so when you pass on the talking stick, then I guess you just kind of alternate around the room then?
Whoever wishes to speak, whoever wishes to speak. So often in our organizations, oftentimes in our personal life, we're not invited to speak. Or, here's how it happens. Oh yeah, tell me what you want. And I go, oh yeah, right. Excuse me. And in the meantime, they're taking their cell phone messages. They're doing oh yeah, I'm listening to you. No, I'm not listening to you.
When I went to the movies the other night, they actually have a very direct message now where they say, look, turn off your phones, don't text message. You can't text messages during the movie, because they just have to hit people over the head these days. They're like,
well, that's right. And you go into meetings and you see particularly some younger employees, they're sitting there doing all the text messaging. For all you know, they're saying, that guy's a total jerk. You know, why are we listening to him? That's not communication. That's not valuing the people who sit around that table. So what the talking stick does, or whatever you want to use it, is it centers the people and say, you know what, if it's important enough for us to spend our time coming here, then let's listen to each other.
Well, above and beyond talking and listening, I think one of the most important things you say is, you know, again, no reprisals. That people really can speak honestly and not fear that something's going to happen because they have been talking. Why is that important?
Well, if you told me an idea and I said that was dumb, stupid, and I went back and told your boss or your colleagues, don't listen to him, he's a cockamamie guy, will you ever bring me an idea again? Never.
Right. And then you just get people telling you what you want to hear, which
that's right. And
might be satisfying in one way, but probably isn't.
And how do you develop trust? If I tell you, tell me what you think, and then there is a reprisal for that, trust me, you have just put a black mark on your personal reputation because you did not keep your word, and your word was no reprisal.
We'll be right back. And we are back. Joining me now is Gary Siegel. He is author of the upcoming book, Mouth Trap. He's an expert on email road rage. Great to have you here today, Gary.
Gregory, nice to meet you.
So what is this? What is email road rage?
Well, some people who hold things in will leave voicemails at 5 o'clock when people aren't there, and they'll sit down at the computer figuring this is non-confrontational, I can just say it like I want to, and they write a message that gets them in trouble. In fact, there's even a name for it now. It's called disinhibition.
Disinhibition.
Yes. Well, when you're inhibited, you feel
So like flying off the handle, is that it?
disinhibition. You just kind of go. You just figure, well, no one's there. I might as well just let it out.
Okay, so they're venting in an email, basically.
Yes, yes.
And this is on the increase?
It's on the increase. You know, it's interesting because a lot of people are afraid of confrontation. So they figure, you know, when they speak with somebody, they say that if you're not going to say it within hitting distance of somebody, you know, sometimes it's very difficult. I better watch what I have to say. But there's something about the privacy of being in an office.
Interesting.
You're staring at the monitor. You go, I might as well let them have it.
So they feel more comfortable venting through an email. They wouldn't do it in person, but they'll say anything in the email.
Yes, they'll say it. Sometimes I've even seen people have their secretaries type the email out. You know, I always thought you don't really take an email. We used to take a letter. But there are actually people, very busy people, who tell their secretary, yeah, I'm just going to talk, just write it all out. And
You so and so and such and such.
They can regret what they've put in a ranting email. I'd be very careful on that.
So how do you deal with that? What's the, you know, when you send it, it's too late. So how do you stop yourself from sending that email you're going to regret later on?
You know, there actually is something on Outlook that if they haven't actually read it yet, you can retrieve it.
The recall.
You can't do a lobotomy, right? But
that's not guaranteed, though, right? I mean, that's
no.
You may or may not get away with the recall.
I am as guilty of this as anyone. So what I've become very accustomed to and what I teach in my workshops is I never send anything out that I don't draft first. And unless it's just a minor little email. But I literally, when I wrote to you and wrote to Eileen, I drafted it, walked away from it. 10 minutes later, looked at it. The brain.
Is that because you were going to tell us off?
Exactly.
And you have to tone it down. You have to take a break. And then
you know, writing is all about deciding what
I'm
goes
glad you
in.
did, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I have a number of fears. As a person who's supposed to be grammatically correct, I want to make sure I don't make mistakes like from and form and it's and there, all those little
So you don't send
errors.
emails with typos, as I do?
I try not to.
Okay.
I try not to. And the second thing is that, you know, the sentences that we take out, we may not think that they will have any reaction when we write them. It's that distance that creates it. You know, lay off the ice cream. That phrase you may want to take out of an email.
Yeah, especially depending on who it's to.
Yeah.
So, and I guess too, it can be intentional and unintentional, meaning you may not even realize the way it's coming across in an email because, as Eileen was saying, you know, you don't have facial expressions and tone of voice and all the other stuff going along with it.
Well, you know, English is a syntactic language. It deals with placement. Where you place things matters. And a lot of times we just put too much in our sentences. We just don't think, you know, we're just rambling. And it's very difficult to control that sometimes when the typing is doing the thinking for us. There's also a reticular activating system, they say, in our brain, where what we think with our head, you know, we're typing something out, we're thinking something, but we're actually writing something different. That what we've written, we go, I can't believe I wrote that. Or we write something and, you know, that proofreading process, we've written something out and we read it over, that's not what I was thinking. Sometimes the fingers just type differently than what the brain is thinking.
Or again, maybe even in the heat of the moment, you don't realize what you were really saying until you take a step back later on and realize that
it's that chemical
sounds
tide,
a lot more blunt than...
Yeah. You know, actually, when we use our emotions, it's not... Well, you know, a lot of times we go, I can't believe I said that. And we see politicians doing it all the time, and famous celebrities and business people. It seems that celebrities somehow get away with it. Their careers can sometimes be resurrected. But with business people...
I guess Don Imus made his comeback, yeah.
Amazing.
But there's usually a cost. I mean, people, some way, shape, or form, that people are taken to task these days for things in a way that, I don't know if you want to say we're more politically correct, but certainly you probably have to be more careful than ever about what you put out there publicly.
In business you do because it costs the company a lot of money, and they take that very seriously. Let's not create a sexual harassment lawsuit. I mean, you download a picture, that can be a problem. You type something, press the wrong button, goes to 85,000 people. You want to be just really careful about what you put.
Yeah, we've all seen that. The email that was accidentally In fact, didn't you have a story once about?
I did. There's a woman at a company out in the LA area who sent her boyfriend an email describing what she was going to do to him that night. And I wish I could, can't show that here, but she pressed the wrong button. It went to thousands of employees.
Thousands of employees.
And there is a policy at that company that says no personal email.
Oh.
So she lost her job.
Oh, wow.
But she sued for her job back. And she got her job back.
She got her job back.
She spoke to the judge. She says, you know, if you want to fire me because I made an oops, fire me for that. I pressed the wrong button. But if you're firing me because I violated the policy, everybody at my company violates this policy. In fact, a lot of times I'll ask my audiences, so how many of you, if I were to walk through your offices, how many of you write personal emails, or you go on Amazon, or you go to personal sites? And even with policies like that, everybody's doing it.
And out of curiosity, was this a government agency or was it a private company?
Private company.
Private company. Okay, so she got the job back. So you give some practical tips, though, I think, about how to not send that email out, that whether it's discussing your plans for the evening or but things like what, was it not putting the address?
Leave the section off where it says to. Don't put your name in there until after you've typed the email. That way you don't press the button suddenly like that particular woman did. Also, save it as a draft. It's a great way. I mean, 10 minutes can make a difference. Sometimes I'll email it to somebody else before I send it out if it's an important email. Occasionally, it's just that distance that will make a difference. Read it out loud. Read it backwards, line by line, so you can catch some of those silly errors. And because of texting, you know, we're just used to not writing grammatically correct. And so if you're writing to a client, that could make it or break it with some clients. You know, if they're hiring a lawyer who they want very detail-oriented and that lawyer misspells a name or makes a mistake in the email, it says something about his credibility, his professionalism. So it's worth taking that.
I read a study recently that said that they did a survey of, I think, CEOs of pretty good-sized companies, and they asked them what percentage had perfect email, no typos, and what percentage were kind of sloppy and just. And it was like 50-50. So I'm just curious what you thought of that. But I guess the rational 50% said that, like you said, with image, that that they wanted, they're the CEO, they have to give the right image. And then other people said, look, I'm busy, I'm rushed, I don't have time to sit there, and it's substance. It was some people said the style was more important, and others said what I mean? It was that kind of a thing where I'm just curious if you saw that study or not, or what you thought of it.
I don't know if I saw that study, but I think it has a lot to do with personality. I do make mistakes when I write. I mean, I tend to be fairly open. Words come out of my mouth like gumballs. I have to be very careful what I say. And when I type, I'm the same way. And so I've gotten used to asking myself, what goes in, what goes out? I look at it over with, and with that little break of 5, 10, whatever it might be, 24 hours is even better, I'll go, they may take that the wrong way. It may even be sentences that would do better on the telephone than it would be on an email.
So there might be better modes of, in person or on the phone, depending on what the case may be.
Because you can say can't get it many times, can't do it many times. I can't do it. Gregory, can't do it. But when you just put those 3 words together in an email
Why
by
not?
itself,
Yes, you can. You but you also have strategies for if you do send the email and make a mistake, other than the retract. How do you deal with an issue? I guess I'll let you come up with the example, but how do you, if you put your foot in the mouth or send the email that you shouldn't have, how do you salvage the disaster?
It's interesting because on one of your shows, there was somebody that talked about Aristotle and the whole technique behiand apologies.
Leandra Tomescu, yes.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
And I think she called it apologia. I call it getting naked.
Getting naked.
I am so sorry. I sent you this email. I wasn't thinking. I know that there were a couple mistakes in it, and that's not what I meant. And then you have to make a commitment to changing that behavior, whatever it might be. At work, for example, if somebody comes in late on a constant basis and they apologize for it, really the only way that apology is going to mean anything is to do what?
Well, if they start showing up on time.
Exactly.
Talk the talk and walk the walk and talk the talk.
So if you have employees that are sending emails that are road raged, that really are, this is inappropriate, John, I can't believe that you're writing emails like this. Tell me what I have to do, John should say. I will learn to correct it. I am really sorry. I understand, and listen carefully to what the criticism is, and work at it. I mean, that's why training programs are put together, to help somebody change the construction of their emails. There's actually a structure you can follow for an email called MADE. Put your message smack up front, then the action statement, then the details, then the evidence might be the attachment. I notice with a lot of IT, I don't know if you've ever tried to get somebody at Norton Antivirus or any of those companies to help you get on to their software. They often, I feel like I'm on a hunting party. All right, what do you want me to do? And I'm hunting in that email. Find out what, just put it smack up front. Don't waste the
Usually
reader's
they tell you to
time.
go to the frequently asked questions, I think. I don't even know if they help you anymore these
Oh,
days.
yeah.
But we will be right back. And we are back with Eileen McDargh and Gary Siegel today, telling you how to keep your foot out of your mouth. Okay, so Eileen, you had some thoughts about that email. What were you telling us about the email?
I did, as we were talking about what happens if you've sent the email and it's inappropriate. I think there's a couple rule of thumb. Number one, the more important the relationship, the more critical the situation, you don't send an email. You at least have either voice to voice or you have face-to-face conversation. So that email never even goes out. Second thing is 40% of a professional's time is abused through email. So I think it's both the quantity that we get and the quality of what we get. And you're really talking about the quality. I think we also have to look about with the quantity, because that's just a huge waste of time right there. And oftentimes it's very ineffective.
I'm discovering, though, all over the country, in the workshops I go to, everybody is basing their communication on email. As you said, the bosses are actually saying, just email me. I know they want a record of it, that's why they're doing it. It's a lot easier, conversations take a lot more work, and they are insisting in some cases that employees only write emails, which I think is a huge mistake.
Absolutely, because then you know what we're missing? They're missing the innovation, they're missing the creativity, and they're not creating a relationship with that employee, and we're going to have a huge employee drain, and they don't keep those good people. They screwed up, starting with what's sitting there at that screen.
Because there are times where you have to vent, and as we've discovered, it's not a great resource for venting email. So what I often recommend is, have that conversation on the phone, and if you want to capture that in an email, then you summarize it. You put in what is appropriate and what has to be, if they need to have it in some kind of record, that would be the way to do it.
Eileen, you talk about scripting, a difficult conversation.
Right. Describe, explain, specify consequence. And that's really where you specifically describe what the situation is. You explain how you feel about it, because there's an emotion that's connected to it. You specify what you want or you don't want. And the last thing is what will happen as a consequence. It's a way of being assertive without being aggressive.
But you mean in person, not through email?
In person, but you could use it in email.
Could in email.
But part of me is saying, you know what, if it's a sensitive, if I want to keep this relationship, if this is valuable, because you know what happens? We do this email back and forth. And all the time, think of the cost in business as those emails fly, where if you and I had sat down and had a cup of coffee, we could get it handled right away. And you know what? We could seal it on a handshake, and we got a better relationship.
I think
and we're
we
out
just
of there.
did.
Your hands are cold, girl.
My heart's warm.
What about it? We've been talking about the office. What about at home? How is this affecting Americans at home? What are you seeing, and what are your thoughts on that? Meaning our addiction to email and texting and not talking. Is this carrying over to the?
Well, I saw a wonderful cartoon. It said, "George, email the kids and tell them to come to dinner." And
they were probably in the other room, right?
They were probably in the other room.
Or text them.
We text them. We have we microwave everything, and we've lost the magic of the kitchen.
It's almost like being in a rehearsal hall. You're behind the scenes, and you're hearing all this stuff in the chat rooms, and the line of communication that you see in families and personal become very personal. You're not sharing it on the phone, you're not sharing it live, you're sharing it in, not only are you typing it, but often you're seeing the person. With IMAX, there's the little camera on there.
Oh, yeah.
And people are saying things in these chat rooms and lines that just too much information. It's just a lot of.
You've been looking at MySpace, haven't you?
Yeah. The large. But what does that say about how hungry we are for a human contact?
Absolutely.
And how pathetic that I don't know the person who's in the house next to me, but I'll go find a stranger that is globally apart, and I can be anybody on that space.
Oh, yes, you can, and yes, they are.
So are we at the age where you can actually sit in your room, though, and talk on the computer? People are looking at you. They have the camera and everything. You don't have to type it. You could actually have a conversation.
Well,
and
I think
see that person.
I think that's absolutely true. What I want us to get back, though, is the grounding of human beings. You know, the research says that families that eat together through the age of 6, those children do better in school than families that don't eat together. And I think that's because we teach them socialization and
Thank you
conversation.
both very much for being here today. Gary Siegel, author of the upcoming book Mousetrap. Eileen McDargh, author of Talking Cheap, It's Priceless. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time.